We are back for another episode of American Horror Story. This one is called Ball, and it is about a woman played by Billie Lourd. She has been in many previous seasons of American Horror Story, but the one that I most remember her from is her playing the babysitter of the little boy in Cult, which was one of the seasons of American Horror Story that I did not like, but we are not going to get into that. In this episode, we also have the woman that the therapist. She played in Soul Food. And there's another guy, Chad James Buchanan, and he also played in Apocalypse. He was one of the guys that was in the meeting room. He's one of the people that made it into the little house to survive after everything was going on in Apocalypse. So I can't remember if he really had a big role or not, because I kind of had to look him up. But despite all that, we are going to get into tonight's episode of American Horror Stories, and this is episode 5. So I have mixed feelings about this episode. I just don't know how I felt about this episode, so we're just going to talk about it. So the girl that's the main character in this one, her and her husband, they are going through many fertility treatments so that she can conceive. And after going through so many fertility treatments, she decides that despite her chances decreasing as she goes through the fertility process, that she's just going to keep going because she really, really wants to have a baby. She wants to be a mom. So during one of her last fertility treatments, she goes up to the counter. Well, she's exiting the facility, and the receptionist at the counter, she lets her know, like, hey, this might not be my place, but I have this little statue. And it's, I guess, legend, or it's been passed down through my family, and it's the reason that I was conceived. But all I know is if you put this little statue under your bed while you're trying to conceive, you will have a baby. So she ends up having a baby, and she is really having a hard time being a new mom. The baby's always crying, and she's just really, I guess, having symptoms of postpartum depression. She has a housekeeper there that's trying to help her, but she's getting kind of irritated with the housekeeper. I guess because the housekeeper is getting a better response from her baby than she is. So her husband, who's an aspiring actor, he's kind of sticking with her through all of this, and he refers her to a therapist for having what he feels like are symptoms of postpartum depression. She goes to see the therapist, and as time goes on, she's beginning to kind of lose her mind because she's starting to see an entity in the room with the baby on the baby monitor. So she goes to look back under the bed, and she realizes that she forgot the statue was there. But when she retrieves the statue from under the bed, it now has horns instead of just being a wooden carving of just this inanimate object. But you can tell that it's like it has hooves or whatever. So she goes, she puts it in a shoebox, and she continues to experience all these weird paranormal type things. She's hearing static on the baby monitor. She's hearing voices. She feels like she's seeing like this entity or this demon that's in the room with her baby. So she tries to consult her husband about it, and he's just kind of trying to be patient with her, but then at the same time, he kind of feels like she's going crazy a little bit, as does she. She ends up finding the statue again in the baby's bed, and now the statue is becoming like more pronounced as far as its features. The horns are longer. Now it has wings. Like, it just seems like the statue is transforming as time goes on. Now she finds the statue in the baby's bed, and it just really creeps her out. She goes and she asks the housekeeper, which she has a Hispanic housekeeper, and she's like, hey, did you put this in my baby's bed? And the lady's like, why do you even have that? And she's like, no, that's besides the point. And the lady was like, no, that thing looks evil. I quit. I'm out of here. Which I respect her for that, because things like that kind of freak me out too. So if I were to see something like that, I would also be like, why do you have this in the house? I'm out. So instead of just taking the statue out of the house, she actually keeps it in the house, but she continues to experience all these things. Her husband, he's getting like small role after small role, but after he lands a bigger role, he has his friends over to celebrate him getting a better role in a TV show, which features him having a few lines, but it's better than him just being an extra like he has been. So during that evening with his friends, they decide to play with the Ouija board. And while they're playing with the Ouija board, she had already been hearing through the static on the baby monitor, I want him. So in her mind, this entity wants her baby. Now, while they're playing with the Ouija board, the Ouija board spells out, my gosh, I have him, or I cannot remember what is spelled out on the Ouija board, but it ended up making her freak out. And she's like, it's the entity that's in this house. He wants my baby, and I'm just not going to let him get my baby. So afterwards, she goes back to visit the receptionist, and the receptionist tells her, that was not my intention for you to be experiencing all of this. So come back to my house. I'm going to give you this spell book so that you can cast a spell in the house to get rid of the entity that's in the house. And so that, you can be free of all this craziness that's going on in your life. So she takes her advice. She goes back to the house. She does the spell in the house. Fog comes out of nowhere. She's dripping blood all over the statue. And to her, she's getting the entity out of the house. But the baby's dad or her husband ends up walking in, and she accidentally stabs him with the ceremonial dagger that the receptionist gave her to use during the ceremony. So now she ends up in a psych ward, I believe, because she is like really losing her mind over what's going on, and no one believes that she's being rational. So she ends up in there. Now, while she's in there, her husband comes to visit her, and he's like, look, I'm here for you, blah, 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 just lying to her, which I don't even realize that he's lying until he leaves out of the facility, and he goes to get back in the car, and who's sitting in the car? The receptionist. They go back to the house and celebrate over everything that they did to make her go crazy. I'm talking about the scratches that she saw on the wall in the basement, the fog that she saw in the baby's room, the static and the voices she's hearing over the baby monitor. They're switching out her medication. Like, his friends actually joined in a group effort to make her go crazy because he did not want to be with her anymore. And in his mind, he's going to have her committed to a psych ward so that he can get, I don't know if his main goal was to receive custody of the baby, but I know that they were like, you know what, this is going to go over really well in our show. So I believe he was basically putting her under all this duress for a show that he's trying to create because he wants his acting career to take off. And come to find out, everybody that came to celebrate with him that night was in on it, which is so trifling. So as they're celebrating, the entity that she had been telling him about shows up and kills all of his friends, but leaves him alive. So he ends up going to jail because, of course, no one believes that this entity has gotten into the house, killed all of his friends, and he's just the last one alive. So he ends up going to jail. She ends up visiting him. while he's in prison, and she lets him know, like, look, how dare you, I'm not going to help you, because I'm assuming that, so he's telling her, like, look, I didn't do it. The entity that you were talking about, he did it. And she was like, how dare you? You know what I went through. You knew what you did to me or whatever. So why would you throw that back at me? So she's actually been released from the facility, and he's wanting her to get him a lawyer for him to help him, even though she knows what he's done to her, because her family's rich. So he needs her money. And she asked him, like, why would you do that to me in the first place? So he lets her know, like, look, I didn't want the baby, first of all. So after trying to conceive for 3 years, he's given her the reason that he's done all of this because he never wanted a baby in the first place. So my thing is, why? I mean, he said that he had told her previously that he didn't want children, but he did this for her. So instead of just sticking to his guns, not trying to help her conceive, he helps her conceive just to put her through all of this and get her committed to the psych ward so that he could get her money, I believe, because her family's like super rich and he's living off of her. So she ends up going back to the house, and we find out that while she's in the psych ward, she has tried the ritual again in the psych ward and actually had success with the ritual, and now she is controlling the entity, and the entity is actually waiting for her to release him out of her control because of whatever spell that she used from the book that the receptionist gave her. And at the end of the episode, she's back in her home, and she is conversing with the entity, and he's like, look, what do I need to do for you to release me? And they end the episode with her basically pulling him to the bed and saying, I will release you if you give me another baby. That was crazy. So okay, that was the end of the episode. My thoughts on this episode was, okay, while she was going through all of this and going crazy, she continued to leave the baby in the room. She never brought the baby in the room with her, instead of continuously leaving him in this baby room that they have for him and watching all this stuff play out through the baby monitor. Okay, that was for one. 2, she never tried to take the statue out of the house, because if you feel like there's an entity in your house and there's this little religious or demonic statue that you have in your home that's causing that, why would you just not get rid of it? Okay, that's number 2. Number 3, so in order to get the entity out of the house, she also never it doesn't seem like it ever occurred to her to take her baby and leave the house to see if things would change. Okay, praying obviously was not an option because she did not try that. And I'm just like, and then over the whole course of this episode, it took like 30 seconds for the entity in the house to kill everybody that was involved in the scheme. So it was like this whole 30 or 40 minute episode, 30 seconds of him killing everybody, and then the rest was like drama that played out. So it's just like, maybe it was I guess the horror in this episode was supposed to be the suspense that was building up towards him killing everybody, but then I'm just like I don't know. I really wanted to like this episode because I'm also trying to conceive. So when the episode first started, I was like, okay, this can be really good, because they're kind of touching on someone who's having fertility issues. Okay. And it just went down this whole other road that I did not expect it to go down. And I was, I guess, kind of disappointed with the way that they went with the episode, it's like, okay, I understand she was willing to try whatever she needed to try in order to conceive, just for it to end up driving her crazy. And then it drove her crazy, but then she came back and then took control over the situation. But then again, I was just like, I don't know. I was not too crazy about this episode. This was not one of my favorite episodes. This episode, I feel like if I were going to rank all 5 episodes from this season, this would be at the bottom for me, as was Drive Through. Or Drive In, I'm sorry, not Drive Through. This would definitely be on my lower end of the episodes that I really kind of did not like. Maybe it would be like a step above Drive In, and the Naughty List would be number 1, and then the first and the second episode would be 2 and 3, and then this would be number 4, and so far Drive In would be number 5. So I am just not too crazy about this episode. Like, it did not make me want to. It's just like I just don't have that many thoughts on this episode, because it was just so weird. It's just like we watched all of this happen just to figure out it was all a prank in order to drive her crazy, because he didn't want to be with her anymore, and he didn't want children in the first place. It just seemed so weird to go that route and to do all of that instead of just leaving the relationship. But I guess he felt like if he would have left, he would have left without any money and not being able to have custody over his son. So I don't know. I'm really wanting to hear what other people think about this episode, because I just did not enjoy it as much as I thought I was going to enjoy it. So let me know in the comments what you guys thought about this episode. I'm not thrilled about this episode, but I don't absolutely hate it. But it's just not one of my favorite episodes this season. I just don't know where to go with this episode. It's just so weird. But I don't know. Maybe I'm just kind of disappointed because I was really looking forward to this episode, and now I watch it and I'm just kind of like, okay. Let's see what's going on next week. So, I'm really ready to hear everybody else's thoughts on this video. I just don't know. I didn't like it that much. So let me know what you guys thought about the video. I will still be back to review the 6th episode of American Horror Stories. So y'all have a good night, and I will see you guys next Thursday. Hopefully we get a much better episode next Thursday, one that I really enjoy as much as I enjoyed the Naughty List. So yeah, I just feel like I'm going to have to leave it off there, because all I can just keep thinking in my head is this episode was so weird. Like, why did they take it in that direction? So whatever. Hopefully next week's episode will be better. All right. Good night, y'all. And please remember to like my video, subscribe. I have finally hit 10 subscribers. I'm really excited about that. So my next goal is 25. So you guys, can y'all help me get to 25 subscribers so that I can feel like I'm doing something, making some progress here. So, yeah, everybody that enjoys American Horror Stories, just let me know. Let's discuss this episode in the comments, because I really want to hear what y'all think about this. So, all right, good night. See y'all next Thursday.